These are the things in wrestling that I love. That basically, when you sit down to watch something and you just know what you are watching is magic. And I know what we watched tonight was the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast with Vince McMahon live on the WWE Network, which is going to be downloadable on Podcast One. They didn't give a date, but I'm guessing that they're more than likely going to get this up as soon as possible. But just seeing these guys relive their stories, and I know that I get a big pop in my life when I watch shoot interviews of older wrestlers talking about their times, and basically they bring up stories that I can remember and that I want to know more about. You go out and you buy these books like The Death of WCW or Bret the Hitman Hart. I don't know if that's called The Sharpshooter or what it is. And there's been some things. A new wrestling DVD documentary comes out from WWE DVD, and you get to break that stuff down. Like this year, we've got the Macho Man and we've got Paul Heyman. When you get to dig into topics that you really care about, that you really like, you normally will always come up, very satisfied about what you watched. And I thought this was honestly one of the best things that the WWE Network has ever done. This was better than the Warrior documentary. It was better than the Daniel Bryan documentary. I can't remember anything off the top of my head, but I know that they built an awesome set. I don't know if that came from Podcast One or if WWE Network put that together for Stone Cold Steve Austin, but by the looks of that, more than likely we're going to be seeing that in the foreseeable future, with the news coming out that Jim Ross and Cole Cabana are not going to be able to host WWE Talent anymore. Maybe this will become a monthly thing or a bi-monthly thing, but it seems like this is to be something that's going down. But the one thing that I loved about this is I think that Austin knew he had an hour, and an hour isn't really that long. Basically, when they do the shows on Podcast.one and they download, basically he sits there and he talks for about 15 minutes about what's going on in his life that week, and then they get into the network. They run a couple, and in the interview they run a few commercial spots. And even though the podcast is over an hour long, what you really get of interviews most of the time like 45 minutes. So Vince and Austin didn't really do any sort of like, hey, how you doing? Glad to have you here. There was no bullshit. Stone Cold Steve Austin just hit Vince McMahon with questions right off the bat, asking him about how the network is doing. Vince said that the network is doing fine. It's a network suspension thing where basically people have to subscribe over the online, and you can sort of tell the way that this was going to go when basically Stone Cold Steve Austin brought up the people in the UK that are constantly emailing him at questions at Stone Cold Steve Austin. .com or whatever the email is, basically asking, when's the network coming? And Vince, tried to get away with not giving an answer, saying that basically maybe by the first of the year, maybe by something like this. And Austin was trying to get him to lock down a date, and Vince was saying, I can't lock down a date for you, basically, because then when you do lock down a date and something doesn't get met, then you got all these people all pissed off at you. I'll just say that it's one of the number one things on my priorities, and I'm really trying to get it done, and we're going to get it done as soon as we can. Austin talked about how awesome it was to be able to be, backstage at Monday Night Raw, talking about the guys that are on the roster that are really standing out, looking like they're going to be something. They talked about Bray Wyatt, that is the guy that Vince McMahon picked. And then Stone Cold Steve Austin brought up Cesaro, a guy that he talks about on his podcast a lot, and basically Vince McMahon gave the reasons why Cesaro isn't moving up to the top. And as a consumer of WWE, somebody who watches consistently, who is somebody who subscribes to the WWE Network, that watches Monday Night Raw, and it's pretty consistent in their viewing. I don't really understand with what Vince McMahon put down for the reasons why Cesaro isn't connecting, whether if it's because he's Swiss or if he's got a different kind of wrestling style. Cesaro can fucking wrestle. I know that they have this sort of thing like Jericho talks about. It takes a while to learn the WWE style. I don't think that Cesaro wrestles any other style than he wrestles right now. He's one of the best wrestlers in the world. It seems like when you watch his matches, he's somebody who's always coming up with new moves, finding new ways to hit new maneuvers, and does things that nobody else does in the wrestling business. It's one of the reasons why I like him basically so much. And they talk about how basically the guys are walking on eggshells in the back, trying to not make anybody bad, because basically then they get held under the bus by creative. And Vince just says, don't piss anybody off and you'll be fine. And it sort of talks about the things that CM Punk went through, just basically saying that if they don't like you, they're not going to do anything for you, and it shows you that a lot of those things like that he said right there is correct. They both agreed that the roster needs more depth, that everybody needs dancing partners, and John Cena is up on top of the roster, really with nobody else to dance with. I couldn't believe that basically Vince put everybody on blast and the whole company, saying that nobody has really reached for that brass ring since John Cena did. If you really think about it, when John Cena reached for that brass ring, that was at WrestleMania 21. Maybe you can debate that maybe it was WrestleMania 22, but even then, that was 8 to 9 years ago. That nobody in the company has really reached up and tried to grab that thing, whether if you're saying like Daniel Bryan, a guy that pushed himself all the way to winning the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 30. You talk about CM Punk, a guy who's been up there for a long time. Batista's gotten hot through there, and I'm sure there are other guys in the company. I'm not saying that there's a lot of them, but there's a lot of people that have really, come up and been there. Stone Cold Steve Austin brought up the topic of Shane McMahon, basically saying Shane left the company, and he's got his hands at a whole bunch of other businesses. The last thing I heard, he was working with some sort of a pay-per-view sort of a deal over in China, working with sports, and I don't know if he stepped away from that or if he's still with it, but I'm not 100% sure. But basically, Austin asked, Vince McMahon if he wanted to talk about CM Punk, and he really said that he didn't really want to talk about it. And then they really spent a long period of time talking about CM Punk and basically the things that have gone down, and they let him say things that I didn't think they were going to let him. They let him bring up the Colt Cabana podcast. They said, about any word was said. I mean, there was no rules. Maybe if there was rules, Stone Cold just broke them. He said TNA. He said UFC. I know these are things that are brought up, here and there along the way, but they're brought up, so infrequently that when you do hear them, mention their competition, it is a little bit, shocking and a little bit weird. Basically, Vince said there's two sides to every story. He did set out and he did apologize. He did back up the story that CM Punk said that he was fired on his own wedding day. Vince McMahon apologized. He said that in this large corporation, sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, and somebody said that you need to send these papers out. Then they sent the papers out right away without somebody checking to see, when a good day would be. They just probably were trying to get their job done as soon as possible. And Vince was basically saying that. Vince was basically saying that he was sorry. He apologized to CM Punk, which is a big step in this sort of deal. CM Punk did say, I apologize, that Vince McMahon did say that he wished CM Punk would sit down and basically find a way to solve this thing. They brought up a lot of people from the past, whether if it was Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret Hart's another one, guys that basically said they were never going to work with Vince or the WWE again. And once they came together, you can even link in Bruno Sammartino into this sort of deal. They didn't talk about him, but I mean, guys that walked away and said they didn't want anything to do with WWE basically treated Vince McMahon as if they were the devil, and then came back and basically were able to do business again, and that was a lot of good things. They went in to talk about WrestleMania 30, a topic that Stone Cold Steve Austin is very strong about on his WWE. When he was doing his podcast talking about WrestleMania 30, of course, he was there, and he talks about a story about watching the match in the truck, and basically when the 1, 2, 3 went down on Taker, just basically saying that he was surprised. He couldn't believe that it went down, and basically Vince McMahon was saying that it was Taker's way of giving back to the business, and the timing was right for Brock Lesnar. Vince backed up that he made the decision, but it was something that Undertaker didn't even fight against, basically saying that it just was the right time. He didn't feel like he had to go 100-0 at WrestleMania. Vince saying that it was time. Basically, it was good enough for him. Stone Cold Steve Austin started bringing up why Brock Lesnar isn't on TV more, why you have to sit around and wait so long to see this guy. And Vince McMahon called him a special attraction. Brought up the fact that it's not about the title, it's about the performer and the opponent and the story. Right now, Brock Lesnar is the champion. He's not on television. To me, that is a little bit weird, and as a guy that's watched wrestling all of his life, and whether if it was, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, all of these guys who were the champion were on television. Maybe they might have got injured somehow along the way, or maybe they might have missed the show because they were doing promotion, or maybe they had a week off and they just didn't really need them. But the champion has always been there. And maybe they've done things like when CM Punk was injured, he was still showing up at the Monday Night Raw, and he was watching matches from a luxury skybox up at the top, just sort of showing his presence. And with us knowing that Brock Lesnar isn't around, that is a problem to me as a wrestling fan. I can't say that I'm never going to watch again. I watched tonight, but it is something that's always on my mind of like, what are you really working for if there's nothing to really, like, that's like going out and playing the NBA basketball season, knowing that there's going to be no playoffs or no NBA finals. Like, what do those 82 games really matter? As of right now, they have this sort of a stipulation trying to make something strong with the TLC match of Seth Rollins and John Cena, where if Cena loses, he's not the number one contender anymore. But even then, Paul Heyman brought up the fact if John Cena is not going to be the number one contender, who's it going to be? Who else is out there? I mean, it's the only guy that's really going out there. Stone Cold Steve Austin brought up the fact about Randy Savage going into the Hall of Fame. Vince McMahon said that it's absolutely going to happen. He hopes that it would happen soon. He didn't want to name down a date. It looked like Vince was probably kicking Austin underneath the table. I would think that Savage would have to be a lock with that DVD coming out and how strong the sales were. I just don't think Vince McMahon didn't want to make the announcement so soon. More than likely that'll be in December, and they'll try to keep it as secret as possible with the Vignette playing on Monday Night Raw, and then the tickets go on sale the next day. That's the way it's always worked out for us when we're doing the pre-sales. Vince said that it was awesome to see Sting come back. He'll probably be one of those guys who's the special attraction. We probably won't see him wrestle until WrestleMania, and basically, Stone Cold Steve Austin brought up Jim Ross. He basically, said was there any heat between the two? Why are you guys not working? Vince McMahon brought up the story from Los Angeles, basically with the video game launch, where Jim Ross was the host of a long list of guys doing sort of like a question and answer, talking about WrestleMania moments. And that was supposed to hype the video game, and by a bunch of the guys, being drunk and sort of pushing Ric Flair to be Ric Flair, that he felt that the host, Jim Ross, embarrassed the company, embarrassed the sponsors, and maybe made this something that wasn't supposed to air. I've seen this on the WWE Network, so honestly, they had to have put this up, but they didn't put it up until after they had fired Jim Ross. Basically, Vince thought that someday Jim Ross and him would work again together someday. They're just maybe airing it out a little bit. But the best part of the whole podcast came down to when they were trying to find a way to wrap up the Stone Cold Steve Austin show in under a minute, and both of them were trying to step over each other, trying to say something, and then just Vince held his hand up and just said, whoever's in charge of it back there, I own this damn network. We're going to go another 15 minutes. And he just pushed the show back. Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vince didn't have any lack of anything to talk about. Even when the second countdown came, basically it sort of seemed like Vince and Steve could have gone for another hour, if not even more. Maybe they could have put this off for a little bit and bring it up a little bit later on down the road. But honestly, in my mind, I knew that this was magic. This was really, really good. I can't wait to hear this on my iPod, in my ear holes, while I'm either at the gym or while I'm on my lunch at work. You would ask why I would want to listen to something that I already watched. I just think that I'm going to get more out of it the next time I'm sitting there and having my lunch and trying to listen to this. So thank you, everybody. The WWE Network was awesome tonight, and we'll get down to business with some more videos tomorrow. But if you don't have a WWE Network, honestly, in my mind, it's worth $9.99 to watch this instead of waiting for this as a download. I know a lot of people got off because of the free month is over and they don't want to spend $9.99. But honestly, in my mind, you got the TLC pay-per-view coming up in 2 weeks, and these two things alone are going to be worth $9.99. Not alone the Monday Night War documentaries, the WWE rivalries, the vast library of WCW, ECW, and WWE 5 stars in my book. $9.99 well spent. Peace out, everybody. I'll see you guys down the road.